everybody! This is another episode of the Nutrition Club. It's provided by Community Health Programs. My name is Hannah Patterson and welcome to my home office. So you're probably wondering why I'm wearing a chicken shirt. I'm wearing a chicken shirt because this episode is all about eggs. So I wanted to go over couple of things about eggs. It can be kind of complicated for some people who aren't accustomed to even eating eggs or anything. What does an AA grade mean? What does this mean? What does that mean? It's just an egg. Why is there so much stuff? Why do I have to know all these different little things? What's best for baking? What's best for frying an egg? So I figured I'd go over some of the basics and also get into a few little nitty-gritty things that can really kind of be an eye-opener for you when it comes to eggs and how you want to cook them and how they're really going to taste best. So I am going to be going over the anatomy of eggs. I'm going to be going over the different grades and classes and sizes. I'm also going to go over some really cool tricks to know how to store your eggs, as well as knowing how your eggs have gone bad before even cracking them. It's a pretty cool trick. And then also go over where we're getting our eggs for the Nutrition Club, for your CSA share bags. I'm going to go over what kinds of ways there's farming for eggs, and also go over a couple of recipes, a few different recipes or different ways to cook eggs.
So I decided to make a little diagram for you and break down the different parts of the egg. So I'm starting off with the yolk, and obviously this is where the chick would end up forming. So it's actually full of not just saturated fats, but other kinds of fats as well. And it does have the cholesterol in there, and a lot of people are like, oh, it's bad for you. But actually, there's a lot more in egg yolks than you'd realize that actually is really good for you, that you wouldn't find in the egg white. So I would actually say have maybe 1 or 2 eggs a day, if you want to put that in as a healthy breakfast. I'd say 1 to 2 eggs a day. And it actually, there was a study in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition that showed that people with prediabetes and type 2 diabetes ended up eating an egg to 2 eggs every day for 3 months, and it didn't affect their cardiovascular health at all. But also, I would definitely look into talking to your doctor about that if you really want to get into cholesterol issues in eggs. But here we have the egg whites. There's actually 2 different layers of egg whites. The first layer is pretty thick, and the second layer is not so much. And then now what I'm doing is drawing in the inner membrane. So this is between the egg white and the actual shell. And it actually contains the little air cell, which it's like an air bubble at the bottom of the egg. And you can see down at the bottom, that little space is the air bubble. So this also helps keep the egg yolk and everything in place, and keeps it from mixing around and everything. So it's not just the shell. Right, and then now I'm making the shell here. So you wouldn't think it, but the eggshell is actually extremely porous. It's got so many pores, and that's why you really want to be careful when washing eggs, is that you don't overdo it. You don't want to overwash them. So here is my egg. So we've got the shell, the whites, the yolk, the air cell, and the inner membrane. There's actually a lot more to an egg too, but I'm just going to show you this part. So because there's such a huge variety of eggs, they needed to be regulated. So the United States Department of Agriculture actually came up with a system of how to classify and regulate eggs. So what they did was made 3 different classes. I don't know why it wasn't ABC, but they did AA, A, and then B. So AA is uh, the best quality egg. So it's got a big yolk. The center white is thicker, and then the A quality egg is a little not as plump, not as firm. And then the B quality egg is actually more of a flat yolk and more runny whites and everything. That one is actually really good for baking. Then they categorize by size, ranging from jumbo to peewee. The most common sizes are large and extra large, and the most common egg bought is grade A, large.
So proper egg storage is really important to making sure that your eggs are going to last very long. So the first thing you want to do is when you buy your eggs, or if you're looking at your eggs in your CSA share, you want to double check and make sure that there's no cracks of any kind. And make sure that if there is, it's not all over all the other eggs. And then also, when you bring it home, you want to put it right in a refrigerator that's 40 degrees Fahrenheit or below. And you don't want to put it in the freezer. No. And then you want to use it within 3 weeks. And when it comes to leftovers, when you've hard-boiled your eggs, you can use that hard-boiled egg for a week after cooking it. So it'll last that long. And then any other eggs that you may have made frittata or something like that, and you made as leftover, it can last for 3 to 4 days too. So that's pretty helpful. And then also, you want to double check and make sure that the date, the use by date, is correct. So this one is an old one because we like to save our cartons for our own eggs. This one says September 23rd. So typically you'll look at it on the edge of the box. And then for those of you who have CSA shares from the off-the-shelf egg farm, there is a little Best Buy number here that says 6/4. So that means June 4th. I know it's past June 4th, but anywho. Yeah, that's where you look for it on the CSA share bags. And then there's also a really cool trick in case you don't know how long you've had your eggs, you don't remember, and you're not wanting to waste any of the eggs, but you also don't want to eat any bad eggs either.
So what you do is you fill a pot full of water or a bowl, and then you put the egg in. And this one's down at the bottom, and it's kind of laying on its side, which means it's really fresh. And then also we have this other egg where it's kind of not necessarily on its side, but it's kind of pointing upwards. That's about a week to 2 weeks old. And then we have another one that can sometimes be floating in the middle of the bowl. That'll be 2 to 3 weeks old. And finally, we have an egg that is floating. So if it's floating like this, that is an old egg. So that is not the egg you want to eat. It will not be tasty. So there's different types of egg farms. This one you see here is called a conventional egg farm, where the chickens are caged but given some space for nesting, but more importantly, they're guarded from any kind of unnatural predators or diseases. And it also restricts what kind of foods they're eating, so they're given just grain only. This is called an enriched colony. So it's basically like a conventional eggs, except that their cages can be stacked. Here we have a poultry house, which is basically cage-free chickens. Now, organic eggs are laid by hens that are fed rations with ingredients grown without most conventional pesticides, fungicides, herbicides, and commercial fertilizers. And they're also given a certified organic logo or a stamp by the USDA. And finally, we have free range chickens. So basically, they can go outside and go wherever they want and eat whatever they want. Now, the eggs that you get from the Nutrition Club and your CSA share bags are eggs from off-the-shelf farm. They use a technique called pasture raising. So basically, they have access to the outdoors, but what they do is they move the whole chicken coop over to different parts of their fields so that they can always have access to fresh grass. Here you can see their nesting box where they go and they lay their eggs, and then the eggs roll out onto this special collector that looks like this and has a cover so that nothing can get to them and break the eggs, and they can easily collect the eggs. Then they're packaged and sold to you. Now, one way to cook these eggs is to boil them. So I add cold water to a pot, turn on the heat, add my eggs to the cold water, and then I let it come to a rolling boil. And when it gets to that boil, I start timing it. For my soft-boiled eggs, I was doing about, I believe, 3 or 4 minutes to soft-boil the egg. And then I take that out and continue to boil the other egg for what would end up being a 10-minute hard-boiled egg. Once those 10 minutes are up, what I do is I take that egg out and I put it in an ice cold bath. And when it's soft enough to touch and hold, I actually make sure to crack it. And I'll show you why in just a bit. Now I kept my water at a rolling boil because I'm going to show you how to poach an egg. I personally like using those little silicone containers. They do require using a little bit of oil in them, and then I gently crack the egg in it and I let it continue to boil covered for about 4 or so minutes. Now normally I would do a little bit less water so that it didn't end up submerging into the whole pot, but I was still able to gently remove it from the pot. Now back to the hard-boiled egg. I put it in the cold water, made sure it cracked, and the important part is that inner membrane right there. So if you let the water get underneath that inner membrane, what it does is it breaks that suction that happens on the egg white. So when you do that, you can easily remove the whole eggshell. Now you can see that I'm going to cut the hard-boiled egg in half, and you can see that the yolk is pretty well formed. The soft-boiled 4-minute egg has a soft yolk, and then the poached egg has a runny yolk. Another way to cook your eggs is to bake or shear them. So I set it for 325 and let that preheat, and I added some olive oil, very little bit, in a small ramekin. There we go. And then what I did was I took one egg, you can take 1 or 2, and you gently crack them in there, and then you add any amount of vegetables or dried herbs or spices that you want to put on top of there. And you don't want to scramble it. And then you put it in the oven for 10 to 12 minutes, depending on how hard you want the yolk to end up being, or how runny. Take that out. And here you see how I have mine nice and runny. It's so good. It's a baked or sheared egg.
So I hope you enjoyed all of the information I had to share with you today. I know it can be a lot, but you can always replay this and take some notes. It's some pretty cool little tips and tricks in there that you can really use in the future. And I know that I only used 4 different ways of making eggs. I wanted to show you 7, but there's not enough time. But I do have an awesome recipe that I've already done in a previous week called frittata, a Greek frittata. So if you want to check that out, please go below. I think I linked it so that you can go watch that video. And I hope everybody's staying safe and healthy, and stay tuned for next week's episode of the Nutrition Club. And those of you who are participants of the Nutrition Club, please comment below and just let me know how much you liked this episode. And if you have any questions, please ask. Thank you. Bye.